On March 4th, 2025, I collected my 1000th cereal box. And now I'm going to go into detail about my cereal box collection. My name is Phil, and you're listening to The Lib. Yes, many of you who've listened to this show before know that I have a very strange hobby, but a very large collection. I collect cereal boxes. I've done so for quite a while. Many, many years. In fact, I've been collecting cereal boxes for 32 years of my 46. So, well over half my life, I've been collecting these cereal boxes. However, during that time, there has certainly been some ups and some downs and points where I was real specific on which boxes I would collect, and other times where I would be able to collect a large number at a time. Recently, I've finally gotten around to looking at eBay and seeing that some of the boxes that were in the past that I missed were available. And I was able to find a few. And I got a whole bunch of boxes that were really unique and special through that avenue. But to say the least, from the moment I got my very first box till March 4th, 2025, when I got my 1000th box logged in, I can tell you that there are definitely some strange ups and downs, ins and outs that happened to be with me as I was on this road to collecting all these cereal boxes. And when I tell you that it definitely was not a very straightforward path, which I must admit is the reason why I chose the piece of art that I'm displaying for this episode. Yes, I know I usually talk about that at the end, but since quite literally the path that I used in order to get to 1,000 cereal boxes was very twisty and turny and moved a whole bunch of different directions. The painting that is in front of you is a one of one that I made, and I call it Uncertain Path. For sure, everyone walks a different path throughout their life, and without a doubt, all a person can do is follow it to the end. And quite literally, I'm not at the end of the path for these cereal boxes, but it certainly was not a straightforward route by any means. And I'm going to do my best to tell you how I got from box number one to box number 1000 and soon to be beyond. But truthfully, there's a lot more to it than just picking up a box one day and say, hey, this is it. Picking up another box and say, oh, I'm at 1,000. No. It definitely was not that simple by any means. And in truth, I'm about to tell you that there was probably how many? Easily two, maybe three, if I look through my notes, times where my entire cereal box collection would have stopped as a result of the destruction of most of it, and if not all of it, at certain points. There was definitely a way that I would possibly not have a single box at all. And we're going to get to that. Maybe this episode, depending on how smoothly I get to roll through it, maybe I might split this one because it could be larger than I thought it was. But we'll find out as we go through this show. We'll see how it looks. But as for now, it's time to fill in the blank. Very simple fill in the blank for this episode. Typically, when I'm getting ready to record, I have either a cup of water with me, or a Mountain Dew, or a Dr. Pepper. The question that I've got is, what am I drinking tonight as I'm recording? And admittedly, I am recording so far in advance that I'm not even going to tell you what day it is. It's that far in advance. But I will say this: the answer to the fill in the blank question of what am I drinking tonight as I'm recording is none of the usual suspects. It's actually regular Coca Cola. Totally different than what I usually drink when I record. But this episode is going to be one of my more interesting ones, I think. And yeah, I figured I'd try something a little different. The question: what am I drinking as I'm recording this episode? The answer: good old classic Coke. And on that, I'm about to ring the bell and start the main event. Time for a little bit of Coke before we go. Or just for the taste of it. Unfortunately, it's not Diet Coke, but it's regular Coke. Now, let's begin this. Without doubt, this story needed to be told in full. Many of you have seen an episode that I did very, very early on where I talked about the different things that I collect. And during that episode, I touched on my cereal box collection. At that time, I may have had, would have been just about 4 years ago when I started the podcast. And back then, I was probably around 700, maybe even 600 cereal boxes. Quite a bit. Not the 1,000 I have right now. So for sure, during that time, I increased a lot of cereal boxes. But I had to absolutely say that this is something that needed to be done because this collection has become a very, very special part of what I've got. Almost where people say they can be identified by certain things. My cereal box collection is probably one of the things that can certainly say would be an identifier of me. Something that I've just sort of grown into and has grown with me over those 32 years I've been collecting these things. Which just goes to say that just how I've come to appreciate this collection, and certainly the ups and downs about it, for sure, make for this story to be quite unique. In fact, it's so unique that I may have mentioned it on a few episodes prior that I'm about to tell a story of 2 years of my life that sort of intertwine with each other to become literally one giant story that I'm going to try to break down into at least 2 episodes. But the more I think about it, the more it could even expand further than even this episode. Because it turns out, without question, even my cereal box collection happens to be a part of those 2 years in that story. One of the things that is very prominent about that story is, in fact, my cereal box collection. So I'm going to touch a little bit on that if I make it that far, because there's so much, as the great Conrad Thompson would say, there's so much to unpack here. And there's no better way to start than in a very unique way, which has almost nothing to do with a single cereal box that I've collected. Yeah, how am I telling a story about all my cereal boxes? And the first thing I say is, I'm going to start by telling you something that has nothing to do with cereal boxes, because I'm setting the mood for the whole thing. It really starts back in my sixth grade year, just about the end of the year. I ended up moving. Now, that's important because it's going to mean a lot later on through the story. This move took a lot of the possessions that we had, we put them in storage units. And during that time, as we were moving from the one place in Barnegat when I was in sixth grade to a little town called Mayetta, New Jersey, and we're talking a really little town. Quite literally, if you were to run the distance of the town in a straight leg, I'm thinking it's less than a quarter mile safely. If you just ran from the front to the end, I might give it maybe a mile and a half straight down, and that's generous. It's really small. But at that point, that was the first move that I had made in my life, and at that point, it was 1990, and I was going into seventh grade that year. 1990, 91 was my seventh grade year. Spent the entire time making some friends, seventh grade and eighth grade, and then, ta-da, we're gonna get to the collection. 1993. I'm a freshman in high school. I was a wrestler for a couple years in seventh and eighth grade, and it turns out that the coolest thing happened, and I was so taken back by it. Because I was wrestling, one of the things that I was doing at that time was I wrestled the weight class of 171 in my freshman year because I had wrestled 170 in eighth grade. This is important because in eighth grade, I started off at about 163 pounds and I had 7 pounds to work with, 8 pounds to work with. And so what I did was I was able to just eat a balanced diet, whereas most wrestlers end up having to drop weight in order to get to their weight class. I chose to wrestle up, so I was lighter than the number that I needed to get to, so I could eat whatever I wanted. And it turned out that this worked out very beneficial, and I ate a lot of Wheaties. And by the end of the season, I ended up being about 168 walking around, and that was plenty of weight that I needed for that weight class. Back to ninth grade, turned out that I wanted to wrestle the same weight class. And as a result of the much more intense training in high school, when I started at 178, I thought, man, I'm probably going to suck down to about 165 and it won't be a problem. No, I ended up going all the way down to 160 from 168. I dropped from 178, I dropped all the way down to 160, which was the next literal weight class. And I would have had to fight in order to get underneath 160 in order to do it. So again, I chose to wrestle at the higher weight class. And as a result, I literally was at the mercy of food, where some guys had to not eat in order to maintain their weight. I had to overeat in order to try to get a little bigger. And most of that year, my freshman year, I never weighed more than, I think the biggest I ever was 165, which is a good 5 pounds underneath the weight class. So I had plenty of room. So it was a lot of mashed potatoes for me and a lot of chicken nuggets. That's what I did. But I also ate, like I said, Wheaties, a lot of Wheaties. And that's when it happened. I was eating these boxes and boxes and boxes and boxes of Wheaties. I mean, lots of boxes of them. And then one day, I saw this gray or silver box of Wheaties, and it just caught me by surprise. And I'm like, wait a minute, this is different. This is really cool. And then I looked at this box of Wheaties, and I looked at the person who was on the box. it was Michael Jordan on this gray box of Wheaties. And I was so intrigued by the fact that this Wheaties box had Michael Jordan on it, like many others had, but this particular one was gray. And it caught my attention because up until that time, only thing I had ever seen was an orange Wheaties box. And so without question, I said to myself, I need this. I got to keep this. And so I did. Way back in 1993, my first box was the Michael Jordan Gray. And I was just in awe by this thing. And I was so in awe by it that my eye started to catch other unique cereal boxes that were just different, that just sort of were off the rails. And at that time, there had been many boxes that had come before, and I had totally missed the boat on. But now I was becoming a little bit more aware, and I saw a few other boxes. I saw a um, a Major League Baseball box that was from Frosted Flakes, and I grabbed that up. I saw a few others to the point where now, in '93, I had about 10, 12 cereal boxes. That's it. And '94, I saw a few that were interesting, and it bulked up to maybe about 15. Not really that many. Not really that many at all. And in '94, I ended up, not in '94, it was '93, '94, '93, '94 was my sophomore year. So yes, it was that summer, my sophomore year, that we had a very strange occurrence happen at the the place that we were living at in Mayetta. Turns out the owner was taking the rent from the people who were out in his houses, but he actually didn't own the property, and so everybody had to leave. And at that point, we had to gather up everything real quick, put it in a storage unit. But this time was the first time that I had something that was somewhat sensitive with those cereal boxes. I was a little unnerved because there was some stuff that was lost in translation between the move from Barnegat to Mayetta. And I was slightly concerned, but it wasn't really anything that was on my radar too much. I just sort of took it as what it was, and I said, okay, if I lose the cereal boxes, I'd lose them. Wasn't even thinking about it. And so we find another spot in Barnegat, and wouldn't you know, there was no issue. Pulled those cereal boxes out, and here they were. And I found a few more. Found a Jurassic Park cereal box right around the time when the movie just came out. And it was a very interesting one because there was some sort of mechanism inside for $1 million prize. If you found it and the box roared, you would be able to be eligible for $1 million prize. And I thought that that box was neat, first of all, because of the prize possibility and because it was the movie Jurassic Park featured on the cereal box. So, of course, I added it to my collection, continued to move on without much thought of the fact that this is just something that I'm doing on the side. I never really told too many people about it. And at this point, I only had about 20, 25, maybe tops. And throughout the time, I mean, there was a couple more Wheaties boxes that got my attention. There was this really delicious cereal that was called Dunkaballs. And what they were basketball shaped, sweet corn cereals, and they were incredibly good, super addictive, and they were actually in a blue box. That's why it caught my attention. And that was during basketball season. And a year later, they stopped making them. And it was such a terrible shame because it was actually a really, really good cereal. My cousin just, again, one of those things. I had one that I kept, and then I just kept eating the others because it was just so good. Now, they never brought back, but instead, they used the same formula and they used footballs, and it was just as good. It was quarterback crunch. Same scenario, just instead of basketballs, they were shaped like footballs, but it was the same cereal. All that to say, I got two boxes out of that one. Then, of course, in 94, 95, ended up moving again, leaving the small place in Barnegat, and I ended up staying with my aunt essentially for 2 years. Now, during this time, this is very fascinating. The stuff that we had was put in storage units again, and over this time, it was locked away, and it was literally not on my mind at all. I wasn't thinking about these boxes in any way whatsoever. Just totally wasn't cognitive that they even existed at that point. For some reason, I just sort of had a almost a dark ages point, and I wasn't thinking about these cereal boxes in any way. I was more focused on what I like to call I had a one track mind, where the only thing I thought about was track because I was a shot putter and a discus thrower, and I captained by this point in my junior year and senior year of high school. And the only thing that mattered to me was track. Like I said, I had a one track mind. And over that time period of the middle of my junior year all the way through my senior year, one very specific thing happened. During those 2 years, I did my best in track. I had fun with my cousins and a couple friends I knew, but I didn't collect a single cereal box during that 2 year period of time of 1995 through 1996 when I graduated. I didn't get one box, not one, not a single box. So my collection after what would have been 3 years was 20, 25 tops at that point. And it was because I wasn't thinking about it. Almost like I had a dead spot of watching wrestling. And of all times, my wrestling dead spot was the Attitude. No, not the Attitude Era. I watched every bit of Austin and Rock. I missed the Ruthless Aggression era with John Cena and Eddie Guerrero doing his thing, and a lot of Chris Benoit, Edge. I missed a lot of that. But during that time, those 2 years, I was completely dormant. 95, 96, didn't get a single box. Now, my mother and my stepfather moved to Manchester my senior year, and I was staying at my aunt's still. And I would go and stay with my mother and my stepdad on the weekends and return back to my aunt's house in order to continue going to school. During that time, my things were primarily at my mother and my stepdad's house, where my cereal box collection was still there. Now, it was stored in a big box that maybe like a moving box. It was one of the larger size ones, and there was plenty of space in it. All the boxes were together or formed, and they were just sitting inside that box. And all I had to do was just go in there and look every once in a while. And most of the time, I didn't even look when I came home. Now, once I graduated high school, things changed a little bit because then I went through the cereal boxes and I thought to myself, you know, this was a pretty neat thing I was doing. Maybe I'll start picking out some more that were kind of special. And during that time, I was looking for cereal boxes. I started working at ShopRite, and when I was at ShopRite, I would go down the cereal aisle naturally. And when I was looking at the cereal aisle, I saw some unique cereal boxes from time to time. Maybe one a month that I would be like, wow, that looks kind of neat. I think I want it. And I'd get it. And I'd try a little bit of it. It usually was disgusting. But fortunately for me, I had two younger cousins, much younger. We're talking like when I graduated high school, my oldest of these two younger cousins was just going into kindergarten. So, and her sister was even younger than that. So I would have these cereals I didn't like, and I'd give it to them so they could eat that sugary cereal. Win win. I got the box, they got another box of sugary cereal to keep them up all night. And occasionally, like I said, during that time, this is now 1996, I would have these boxes every so often, and I got my cereal box numbers up to about 30, 35 in 96. So this is a very, 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 very particular thing that I'm doing as I'm looking and seeing these boxes that are rare and I'm like, all right, I'm going to go. And I started to, as I was looking at these things, they became more and more fascinating. Now, there was a point in time when a box came out. Um, Captain Crunch had a cereal, which they still now have all this many years later, this 30 years later, called Oops All Berries. But I was obsessed with finding one of these boxes when it first came out, and I went to ShopRite. I went to um, a place called Grand Union. I went to a place called, which no longer exists, Pathmark. I couldn't find this box. I even went to the grocery manager at my store and asked him, "Do we have this in the store?" And he was like, "We didn't get any yet." And I was like, "Okay." And I literally got this from the horse's mouth. And at that point, I was really on a mission specifically to get this one box. And this is the first time that I was actively on a mission to find a particular cereal box. And this was in 1997, if memory serves me correct. Yeah, it was 1997, late 1997, early 98. I was on this hunt for Oops All Berries. Couldn't find it for life. Then it dawned on me to try this store that my stepdad worked at, and this store was usually, how can I put this? Most of the people who went there were senior citizens, if not all of the people who went there were senior citizens. And in my mind, I was thinking, probably not going to find it here. That store was Edwards, which no longer exists either. And wouldn't you know, when I walked to the door, went to the cereal aisle, there it was. Oops, all berries. In this store that was pretty much a store that elderly people went to because it was literally right in the middle of retirement villages on all directions. And then I think it was my mother who actually said, well, sometimes they have their grandkids over and maybe they want to give them some sugary cereal. And sure enough, that's probably why they had it there. It's amazing to think that that's what it worked out like, but I'm telling you, that's how it worked out. And I'm not going to argue the point, but I felt very, very pleased because that was the first time in my cereal box collection that I had actually gone to seek out and find a cereal box. The first time. And I thought it was really a lot of fun. And that was 1998. 97, 98, and that puts me around 35, 40 cereal boxes at this point. I'm extremely picky with the ones that I'm going for because the first thing that I had concern with was because I was storing them still in that moving box, and I didn't have a very big room to put them in. So the number one thing that concerned me was space because I started noticing that some of these boxes were bigger than others and they took up some room. And because they took up so much room, so much space, I wanted to make sure that I had a handle on it, and I became very, very selective as a result of it. That's why after 5 years, like between a combination of a dead spot and space and time and starting to look for this stuff again, I only had 40 in 5 years. So you figure it was an average, seriously, of like 8 cereal boxes a year. So I was that picky for that beginning part of my cereal box journey. Now we start to move forward to 99, 2000. We then relocate again in 2000. Now, at this point, we're in the same area, but the owner had sold to another place, and they were building all new apartments, and so we had to leave for a little while. And again, my cereal box collection, this time around 40, was now being threatened in some way. It was now going back into a storage unit for what would be the third time. And of course, that meant that it was going to be locked away out of my sight, out of my vision for a third time. And during this time, of course, I had no real access to them or really any way of dealing with other stuff. Now, of all things, to put that cereal box collection in there and just sort of know that it was going to be in there for what was 4 more months. Because in 2000, the end of 2000 was when they went to go rebuild this stuff, and the new apartments were set up and ready to go into in April of 2001. So it was 4 months that the cereal boxes were there, and during that 4 month span, I didn't add to the collection. But I was now working at Wawa at the time. Made a little bit more money than I was when I was working the shop, right? And, well, I mentioned working at Wawa quite a bit throughout my podcasts. And the one thing that made it different was now I had a little bit more disposable income. Sounds weird to say that. But when you're at the time 21, 22, still at home, had a little bit, paid some bills, helped out around there, and I had a little bit of disposable income. And besides buying video games, I started buying cereal boxes. I became a little less picky because now I had a bigger room and a closet that I could stick these boxes in. And so I did. In 2001, I probably got about 25 boxes that year alone. Still very picky when you think about how many that I generally work with now. Very picky because that's literally, when you think about it, that's only about 2 boxes a month. But it was somewhere in the neighborhood of 50% of what I already had, 20, 25 boxes. It was a pretty drastic increase. And I started losing track of just how many that I had collected at this point. And 2002 rolled by, which is a year that I'm going to discuss on another show. So we're not going to get into too much detail in 2002 because that's a completely different show. and same with 2003. But the way it looks right now, I'm rolling pretty good on time. I'm going to be able to actually finish what I want to start here. So, I digress. So, let me continue. 2001, I had said I collected somewhere between 20 25 cereal boxes. So now I'm thinking I have about 65, give or take. And then 2002 comes around, and I really don't know how many. Now, because I wasn't really keeping track of it, and I just kept finding them, and I was way off base. I didn't know how many, but I knew that I had more than I realized, and they were starting to take up a lot of space now in 2003. I had a lot of other problems that were going on in 2003 that I will discuss in a future episode. But the issue at the moment was I had all these boxes in my closet in this box, and I didn't know what to do with it. So during 2003, I had a situation that I'm going to, like I said, future episode, probably in 2 weeks' time from what you're going to get after this one is going to be me talking about 2003. And a week after this will be 2002. They blend together. But while I was in a position to actually take inventory, I finally did. Now, this is 2003. I had been collecting cereal boxes since 1993. So that's 10 years. And during that time, I had never thought twice about seeing how many I had, about collecting how many I've been putting together. So during this time in 2003, it was end of November. I had taken some time to lay them all out on the floor of my room. I grabbed a couple of loose leaf papers and I separated those loose leaf papers into categories. And the categories were as follows, being very specific that these were the categories that I wanted to use. By taking all those cereal boxes and lining them up in my bedroom, they took up most of the floor. Now I needed a way to catalog them. And the way I thought about and the way that I do it to this day and won't change because I like the way it works. I separated them into major groups. Kellogg's, Post, um, General Mills. Now, granted, General Mills makes Wheaties, but because I had so many Wheaties boxes, I gave Wheaties a category all of its own. So there was General Mills Wheaties, essentially. Wheaties, all Wheaties boxes, General Mills. Kellogg's, Post, Quaker. Quaker cereals makes, what does Quaker make? Captain Crunch. And those varieties are all Quaker. Um, obviously, Kellogg's, you're talking about your Wheaties, your Frosted Flakes, General Mills, Trix, uh, Lucky Charms, going to be in General Mills, and Post. Post, you're going to find what is a Post cereal? I don't have my logs in front of me, but Post, you're talking about what is a Post cereal? Hold on now, let me see what Post is. I have my whole briefcase and log right here, so I want to give you a taste of what Post cereals are. Probably going to kick myself when I Post Pebbles. That's the most one. Fruity Pebbles. Flintstones. Fruity Pebbles. That's your Post stuff. And of course, I have one other category, which is probably my favorite category because it's the one that some part of me is considering uh, breaking up into smaller categories, but I think I'm going to leave it as is because one of the categories that's in here is could potentially be its own separate one, especially since I've been using um, eBay to find more cereal boxes, and a lot of those cereal boxes actually fall under the category of Ralston. But because I have as many boxes as I do, I probably have a total of maybe, I don't know, 20 Ralston boxes, which would fit under that category. But that last category I have is called Other, which, of course, where I would find stuff that I get from Walmart, which is pretty, I sound crazy. There's pretty good cereal boxes that they have with their Great Value brand that you just have flavors that they just don't make. So, the Great Value brand, um, this one has my G.I. Joe cereal boxes of all things. Great cereal that's made out of protein, Magic Spoon, that's in others, as well as my 1000th cereal box, which I'll tell you what that is towards the end. But I took the time to finally categorize and catalog all of these things. And in 2003, I used one of what is 100%, if I had to put my top 10 possessions in this world, one of those things is not my lists per se, but the first thing that I found in order to actually count my boxes with. It was a envelope, and it's very, very special to me. It's one of my most favorite possessions, and this envelope happens to be an envelope from season tickets, a season pass from Great Adventure that was a specific request. Once I got to around, guess once I graduated high school, my Aunt Susan, who passed away this past December, asked me at one time, it's like, what can I get for Christmas? And I told her, you know what, for the foreseeable future, because I was young, like 18, I asked her very specifically, if you could just get me a season pass to Great Adventure every year, I'll be good. And she honored that request up until the time when I finally told her, yeah, I think it's time for me to not do that because I didn't go except for one time. Because usually I would go every week until I started seeing my future wife. I then only went one time that year. And at that point in time, I was beginning my transition to Philadelphia, and it was impractical for me to continue to get the season pass. It wasn't practical anymore. And that was in 2007. But back to 2003, I had my list, the count, not the list, but the actual number count, where I wrote down how many cereal boxes I had. I used that envelope from a season pass that actually at the time would come to you in a little card, and I would write down the number of cereal boxes that I presently had after I got a new box. I would take my inventory, write the name of the box and any pertinent information about the box on my inventory, and then I would scratch off the number previously and I would add the number to what it would then change to. And I would do that on the envelope. And up until I continued using that envelope until I filled it up. I don't remember what the last number was on the envelope, but it was some crazy number, some 600 something. But that envelope, I have it laminated and it's in my office. And like I said, it's one of my most prized possessions, that envelope. Even more so now than before. But for certain, um, in 2003, when I did that count and I put on that envelope, the very first number was 248. 248. I know what you're thinking, but you just said that in 2001 you thought you had like 60. Yeah, I did have like 60. But when I got more space and I became less picky and there were more interesting boxes that came out during that time period to the point where I started gobbling them up. And there I was at 248 boxes. And I was impressed, but a little nervous at the same time because I had so many and it was getting difficult to fit them. It was impossible to fit them inside of my my moving box. The only way that it would work would be is if I selected a certain number and said, "Well, I'm going to break these down," but I still didn't have the heart to do it, and it became really, really tough. And of course, I started collecting more, and 248 turned into 350, and then turned into 500. And at this point in time, I had gotten married. It was 2009, and here we go again. We're now moving, but this time we moved into my mother-in-law's house in 2011, and I had access to a basement. And of course, that's where I stored my cereal boxes, inside that giant cardboard thing, because at this point I realized that I couldn't keep all these boxes together. There was just too many. So I had to separate about 25. And I said, these 25 will be the standard. And if I find ones that are more interesting, I will reevaluate every so often and I'll break down the boxes that do not meet the standard versus the new one, which is higher standard. And that one will be standing and the others will be broken down. And when I say broken down, I mean instead of being fully formed, I flatten them. And of course, by flattening them, they fit into that box. I get hundreds of them inside that box. Then, sometime around 2015, one of my greatest nightmares happened, and it was my own fault. But at the same time, it was a plumber's fault. And here comes a pretty cool story inside of a story. We had some serious issue with the heating in our house, and we needed to replace a piece of the heater. It was this giant bulbous thing that I guess was sort of a filter for the heater. I don't know what it is. I'm not a plumber, and apparently neither is the guy who fixed it. But what ended up happening was he put this piece on, and the weight of this piece versus the thin pipe, which was maybe an inch around. Now, to give you an idea how big this unit was that he put on there, the unit itself was maybe the size of two basketballs, and the pipe that was around it was maybe the size of the neck of, I'm gonna say, a wine bottle neck. So something maybe an inch thick. Was holding up an object that probably had a diameter of, like I said, two basketballs. And the weight of this thing, it probably weighed 15, 20 pounds on that small little neck pipe. Needless to say, one day I come home and I see something coming from the basement, and it seemed like it was smoke. But called the fire department and they figured it all out. And what it wasn't smoke, it was water. That big bulbous thing had bent the pipe that it was sitting on, and it just started shooting out hot water. Now, my brilliant plan of where I put my boxes was in a spot where I could just go right down there and get them. Of course, it was right next to the heater where the pipe was at. This was probably the biggest disaster of my cereal boxes ever. At this point, I was probably around 450, and this thing was shooting water straight down. Now, we're going to rewind. This is about 2015. We're going to rewind. I know I'm looking at the time. I'm going to go a little long, but I think I can finish this entire story. But I'm going to rewind to 2009. Now, 2009 was a rough year because my grandmother had passed away. And she had died the day after her 48th birthday. And one of the things that I wanted, and I still kind of want another one, a better one, you'd say, but it wouldn't be better one. Well, I wanted a Captain America shield, one that was big enough to actually be able to hold around and just hold. Now they make these really cool metal ones, and that's kind of what my mind is set on eventually getting. But I saw the day after her birthday was Halloween. She passed November 1st, 2009. After she had passed, I took a few days off from work and I was working in auto shops at the time. I was working specifically at Strauss, which has since closed. And I was driving around with my mother and I saw a Halloween store. Just wanted to go in the Halloween store, see what was in there. Halloween store was about to close. Obviously, it was November 5th or so, and they were just trying to get rid of some inventory. And what do I see but a Captain America shield, a 24-inch Captain America shield, plastic. And I was like, oh, this is great. It was $25. Go to the register because it was a end of Halloween sale because it was a Halloween toy. The shield was actually $1. And I always look up and say, Grandma knew I wanted a Captain America shield and put me in the right place, the right time to go get one. I got that shield. Fast forward to 2015 again. The water is spraying all over the place, but it's got a direct line on my cereal boxes. Guess what's on top of that cardboard box that my cereal boxes are in? There was two things. There was a City Year raincoat, but what was above the City Year raincoat that didn't even get a drop of water on the City Year raincoat? My plastic Captain America shield that I got after my grandmother passed. So she was essentially almost guided me to get that shield that time because it was going to protect one of my favorite things. Essentially, that Captain America shield took all the water and it repelled it away from my cereal boxes that were sitting in a cardboard box. There wasn't a drop of water on a single box. Now, had I not put that shield right there where I did, I wouldn't be talking about having 1,000 cereal boxes because I would have lost 450 of them that day. That's how close it came. The complete disaster. That shield definitely, definitely protected my boxes. And that was probably one of the worst situations that my boxes ever got into. Then we move forward. I then wise up and realize that cardboard over the last 20 years was a bad place to store cardboard. And so I ended up investing a little bit in getting some plastic bins. And they they were in the bins and they still are now. But it only took me 20 years to figure out to put them in plastic. How smart of that could have been, right? That was really ridiculous. But at this point, having plastic bins, they fit. I still store them in bins today, which I should have done from day one, but I wasn't thinking anywhere near that far in advance. But as we move forward from 2015, we keep rolling along, and throughout the time, I just kept collecting more and more boxes because now I have more and more space. And of course, the more space I had, the more boxes I could acquire. And it seems almost as if there was a weird calculus that was involved. It seemed like the more space I had, the more boxes I acquired, the more boxes that were desirable to add to my collection were being produced. So, like I said, at one point I was averaging like 8 boxes a year. Then I started averaging about 20 boxes a year to a point where I was probably going to get like 50 to 60 boxes a year because the amount of cereal boxes that were out there that were desirable to me to add to my collection had increased. Like, I can't explain it, but I have to explain it in only this way. Somebody realized somewhere that these cereal boxes are very much like two very specific things. They're very much like art because every one of them is unique and they have special designs on them, and that's one of the coolest parts about them. And two, they're like sports cards because some of them are really rare. And the best sports cards are the ones that they don't make very many of, the one of ones, like my painting in front of me. But more importantly, if you don't have objects or things that are one of one, what's more impressive than that? Something that can be created and nobody thinks about keeping, which is what cereal boxes end up being. People go, they eat their cereal, they empty the cereal. What do? You have an empty box. Who cares about the box? Throw the box away. It's pretty safe to say that I don't know the exact numbers, but it's fair, probably fair, that 95% of people who eat cereal, regardless of what is in it, regardless of what the box looks like, will throw the box away when they're done. Thus, cereal boxes like my Jordan Gray that I've had for 32 years are very few and far between. In fact, that's what makes it so interesting because in 2019 and 20, when we were in an apartment in the Port Richmond area, had stuff inside of the storage unit again, and there was a Target and a ShopRite and a Walmart around. I was able to gobble up even more boxes, and I positioned my collection in a place where I could easily access it. And I would go get a box, get two, three boxes, break them down, or keep them together, depending on which one I wanted to do, and put them directly in the storage unit. And at that point, my collection just began to grow and grow and grow and grow even more over that 2 years because I had complete control and access to where they were being kept, and I had no concerns about them at all. Whereas even now, I have even less concerns because they're sitting in my office, safe as can be. Of course, I have a handful in my room, but I have space and I have the area to keep them in. So, of course, when you get more space and you have more area to keep stuff in, my magic number of 25 cereal boxes broken down changed drastically from 25 to the point where I don't have a number. I simply look at the box, assess what the box is, and if I believe that the box has enough value to me that I'd like it to stay intact, I will keep it intact. If it's a box that doesn't scream uh, overly special, I will then just break it down. And when I break it down, it's easier to store. And of course, it's a lot easier if I can get the ones that I can break down. But if there are some that I don't feel the desire to break down because I think they're just too unique, I have no problem keeping them intact at all. And that is what brings me to the next part of this story. It went a little long, but it's not quite overboard. I didn't have to do this in 2 episodes, which is kind of cool because I wanted to do this all at once. I want to tell you that there are specific markers which mean that I am going to want to grab these boxes and keep them. There are keywords that hit on these boxes. And when I see these keywords, they're instantaneously targets. And sometimes I will seek them out because now I understand that seeking out boxes is something that I'm willing to do. If I find a cereal box that says any of these magic words, rest assured I'm going to go after it. Limited edition, collector's edition, special edition, and then my favorite word to see on any box, and it comes in two different forms, but that word is new. New. That's a great word because new is probably my favorite word. It's probably more important for me to see the word new than it is for me to see special edition. Because, especially in the cereal box collecting world, the word new means that they've decided that this cereal is their new toy and they want you to buy it. But as a collector, I know that these things are hit or miss, just like anything else. If some new product comes out, there isn't a really great chance that it's going to survive the whole time. I've got plenty of cereal boxes that said new on them, and that stuff was gone in 6 months or less. And I'm real happy about it because to find these boxes is difficult. Like um, the lemon, ugh, much I hate lemon. The lemon Cheerios, the peach Cheerios. That was delicious stuff, but gone, and it said new. And then, of course, my favorite type of box is when they say new on it. They make the box. You go ahead and you buy it. Next thing you know, it happens every once in a while. There's a different color box, but it's the same product, and it says new on it. So they made the box two different colors because they put it out. They didn't think it was going to do so good. They brought it back, and then they put it out again. I got a couple of things that some people would call Mandela effects. They're like, yo, I know that box came in and it was blue when it first came out. Now all of a sudden it's orange? Yeah, there is absolute fact. It was blue and now it is orange. For sure. I have a couple of cereal boxes that are like that, where they came out with the same thing and it's in a different color box. So the Mandela effect was certainly in effect for some people on those if they really paid attention to it. But that's another story altogether. But with those magical titles, those magical words, that's the first part of it when it says new, when it's a completely new cereal. But then also when it says new taste, new shape, new color, something. It's like new look, same taste. All these things mean there's something a little different about the box and the cereal. And it catches my attention. And those are the kind of boxes that I want to get my hands on. So when I see new, that's something that's going to definitely warrant a look at getting. And of course, in the course of having 1,000 of these things, and realistically, even after I logged in my 1,000th box, I still have a few doubles. I originally started counting a few boxes in doubles, but I have some doubles that I don't account for that I got most recently. So I probably actually have about 1,008 because of the doubles, maybe 1,010, but the official 1,000 boxes that I logged in, that's a different story altogether. But now that I've told you what makes them special, I'm going to tell you one more thing about boxes, and that's one of my favorite places to get them. Now, you have to follow my me around the room. There's always exclusive cereals for certain stores. Certain places you can't buy certain things. It's just that way. It really is. And just as many times as I've gone and found cereal boxes at Target, I have found different cereal boxes at Walmart, at ShopRite, at Acme, blah, 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 blah. There's some places that just don't have the same cereal box. So, for my collective purposes, I can't just stop at just one place and say, okay, let me see what you got. It doesn't work that way, especially if I'm on a mission to get a specific box. I absolutely have to travel and go to a couple different places to see which one actually has it. And I'm not so picky as to going to two different places because sometimes you can get a regular size box at one place, but it comes in family size at another place. Now, I have to think about space too. So if I found it, I just usually get it. But if I have the option of getting the family size or regular size, I want to get the regular. But if I can only find it in family, I got to get in family. Just that way. Um, there is one more, well, yeah, another thing I want to talk about, and that's the opportunity to have had my 1,000th box a little sooner. And I make mention of this because I may have said it on one of my shows. It's a very special incident because I had this box. It was in 2007. I got it. It was a Hot Wheels box. Excuse me. And when I got this Hot Wheels box, I got it at I believe it was ShopRite, leading right off of what I was just saying before. Um, different boxes, different places. Now, I had taken my girlfriend at the time, wife now, to work. Yeah, to her work. And then I went to a Target here in Philadelphia. In fact, which makes it so funny, that Target is very near where I live now, but it's not a Target anymore. Went in there, and to my surprise, I saw the cereal box, the Hot Wheels cereal box that I've got. And I knew that on the side of the box it had different other boxes on, they're not boxes, different other cars on the outside. And that's when I learned that those different cars that had on the outside were because this was a series of like 5 boxes, and there were 4 of them that I didn't have, and those 4 were in this Target, and I grabbed them up immediately, put them inside the car, got them. Gonna take them back to my house when I got done hanging out with my wife, my girlfriend. Wouldn't you know? Got into a car accident. Took out my car. Turned out that the power steering pulley broke. No control. Car got no damage. They came. They took away the car. I had my cereal boxes in the back of the car. Now, I had said, yeah, I want to get the radio out of the car because I like the radio. Go to get my radio. Looked in the trunk, looking around for all kinds of stuff. My cereal boxes were gone. That was the first time that I had actually lost cereal boxes. And I thought it was interesting that they took my cereal boxes, but they left my CDs, they left my radio, they pulled it out for me, but they took my cereal boxes. I couldn't believe that. Like, if anything, I'm surprised that I didn't get my cereal boxes and those guys didn't strip out my radio and take my CDs. That's kind of what I was expecting to happen. But it was the exact opposite. They took my boxes. And I thought that was the strangest thing. But that was the first time I had missed 4 boxes of all things. It's crazy. But now that I've pretty much gone over everything I want to go over with the cereal boxes, I can certainly say that it went from having a fleeting sort of like interest to an absolute obsession where I'm at right now, 32 years later. I can definitely say that without a doubt, I really, really enjoy this collection of mine. And the fact that I got to 1,000 boxes at all is amusing to me because, like I said, without that Captain America shield, I would be so frustrated that I probably wouldn't have collected boxes anymore at that point. I wouldn't be at 1,000 right now had that happened. And that was like 10 years ago. I can promise you that when I got to the 1,000th box, which was something that I didn't really think about until I got to 900, because I was just sort of collecting them and just enjoying the collection. And then the number came to mind. And once a number came to mind, then it really got into focus. Wow, I'm actually going to do this. I'm actually going to have 1,000 of these things logged into my books. And I'm still surprised and impressed that I do. And right now, I can tell you that the last 4 that I logged in to make it officially 1,000 cereal boxes were very specific and very targeted, which is something that I was looking forward to because I wanted to have a very special final 4 boxes. To get to 1,000, I wanted it to be even more special than number 1 because number 1 was sort of like a shock that I saw it and it was like, wow, this is neat. I got it. I found it. It's here. I'm going to keep it. But 1,000, I wanted to seek it out and I grabbed it. So I am going to tell you box number 997, 998, and 999 were three very unique boxes that I had no idea that I was even going to find on eBay. But when I did. And I knew right then and there, those three had to be 97, well, 997, 998, 999. And for those of you who are old enough to remember Bozo the Clown, which there's probably a bunch of people who listen to this probably know who Bozo the Clown was, I can tell you that the series of cereal boxes that were made for Bozo the Clown, three cereal boxes. One that was a Fruity Loop sort of box, one was a Honey Nut O box, and a Frosted Flake. Those three were perfect because of what I chose, sought out, and grabbed to make my 1000th cereal box, which was a box that in 2008, 2007, whenever the Simpsons movie came out, and they started doing all kinds of crazy stuff at 7-Eleven because of the Quickie Mart, Hapu. They had, of course, the Homer donut. Then they had a really big hot dog, and then something that was really delicious was this Buzz Cola. Was a soda that they had on Simpsons. Buzz Cola. I bought a 6-pack. Stuff was crazy. But my 1000 cereal box was in front of me, and I chose not to get it because of my my pickiness, and I regretted it for 10, 13, 18 years. 18 years? I regretted that. Yeah, yes. No, can't be. I saw it, let's say it was 2008. I can't remember when the Simpsons movie came out, but it was like that, 2008. 18 is 10, 20 is 12, and then now, oh my goodness, it was 17 years. But I had regretted that ever since. Every so often I made thought about it and thought about it and thought about it. Man, I wish I had kept it. I wish I'd gotten it. But yeah, it was a good 17 years that I had regretted this. But I found it on eBay, and the reason why I didn't get it was because it wasn't up to my standard. And it was the only box they had in 7-Eleven. Just the one. And it was beat up, and I had too big a standard to get it. But fortunately, 17 years later, I found it. I was wise. I grabbed it, and it was better than the one that I had not bought. So it was worthwhile. What it is was a box of Krusty O's, the cereal that was on The Simpsons. And I got a box, and that is my 1000th cereal box, Krusty O's. So my last four cereal boxes all have clowns on. Think about that. All have clowns. Now, I may look and seek out a Joker box just so I can say my last five are like that because I don't necessarily like clowns, but I like fives. So I might look for a five, look for a Joker box or something like that in order to get five with clowns on. Probably going to do something like that. Would make sense. But that's really the story of my cereal boxes. And like I said, this episode was a little longer than normal because I wasn't sure if I was going to break it down because of the end credit stuff that I want to do. But I think even if this is a little long, it doesn't matter because I got the story out. It was a fun story. So to make, I guess you could say, to put a bow on the main event, I would say cereal box number one was Jordan Gray in 1993. Cereal box number 1000 was Krusty O's in March 4th, specifically, 2025. 32 years later. 1,000 cereal boxes. I am so happy about that. And as a result, I'm going to ring the bell and the event is coming to close. But now it's time for the spear of the week. And the only person that could be the spear of the week is that guy who put that very, well, I'm not even going to call him a plumber. I'm going to call him a guy who put that piece on the heater that was supposed to fix it, which actually nearly cost me 450 of my cereal boxes. And that's a very generous estimate. It could very well have been 500 because I knew I had over 500 before I moved. So it's very possible that it could have been 500 that he would have destroyed because of that water. But fortunately, the Captain America shield protected him, or else I would have to have literally speared that guy. And I still think about it to this day. I should still probably spear him. So still, he's the spear of the week. The guy who just almost destroyed 500 of my cereal boxes. Now, we're going to go with the question. And let's see. hmm. Let's see. Here's a fun one. How many backup plans do you make for your original plan? How many backup plans do you make for your original plan? Well, essentially, I like to be like Batman and have some sort of contingency plan, but I don't like to mention it because my backup plan isn't necessarily the backup plan. Sometimes I have a plan of something that I want to do, and then I have a plan of something that I would do instead of that plan, and then I have something that I would do if the plan doesn't work. So essentially, I have a plan itself, what I'm looking to do. But if I change my mind, I might not even do the plan. I might do something else. And then I have a plan to actually be a backup plan to the original plan. So essentially, the first plan would be, I guess we only have one backup plan. I have a plan ahead of the back of the plan, and then a backup plan. So the answer would have to be, to not confuse myself, really only one backup plan. Yeah, one backup plan. That's how that would go. That's exactly how that would go. I'd have one backup plan. Okay, the cereal box episode is complete, and it feels good to have that down on record now about how and specifically when I did the cereal boxes. Like I said, there's going to be an element of the next episode or two that are coming out that's going to entail the cereal boxes. Like, I'm going to revisit some part of my cereal box collection story in my telling of the next couple of episodes of the show, because I'm going to give you a roundabout idea of what the next couple episodes are going to be about. A preview, if you will, of the next two, maybe three episodes. Turns out that for years, I've mentioned it to people here and there that in 2003, that I had gotten sick, really sick, to the point where I almost died sick. And I would mention it from time to time and tell people how it was and kind of what it was, but never really got into the nitty gritty of everything that sort of happened. And then I decided that I wanted to do a show about it. And so I thought maybe it'd be one quick, easy show. And then as I started breaking it down, I realized that in order for me to tell you the story of me getting sick, I'd also have to tell you a couple of other stories, or else it wouldn't make any sense. And then I started realizing that even inside of those couple other stories, I would have to tell stories that were even more stories to connect all these dots. And then it really occurred to me that for me to tell you the story of me being sick in 2003, I would have to go all the way backwards to 2002 because without the chain reaction events of things that happened in the year 2002 that literally altered the direction of what happened to me in 2003. Telling you the story of me being sick is completely irrelevant if you don't hear what happened in 2002. Because the stuff in 2002 literally connects to 2003. Like most of the time, people say, you live your life and things happen and they just sort of flow through. But there are chunks of time where things happen and they don't necessarily connect from year to year, even though life is a series of choices and decisions and events. But I know specifically those specific 2 years, and I mean from January to December, in both of those 2 years, if I had made a different decision in 2002 in any minor step of the way, or if events had turned out differently in 2002, things would definitely have gone a lot different in 2003. And I'm going to attempt to bring that all to light. But of course, I'm going to tread somewhat gently because, well, I have other projects regarding 2002 and 2003 because even on the show, I'm going to give you a good chunk of it, but there's going to be some things that I can't necessarily get into really on the show. And even in other formats, there are pieces of the story that will go to my grave with me. But you'll get enough to know that it is very, very interesting. Trust me. So, the next 2 weeks or more, because, like I said, there's a lot to unpack there on the next two shows minimally. And I'm going to tell you what the title of these potential two shows are. Next week, without doubt, the show will be entitled My 2002 because I'm going to try to go into detail about the things that happened in 2002 and they are going to be super relevant to the things that happened in 2003. Now, whether or not I give you the entire 2003 in one show or even 2002, who knows? If I work on 2002 enough, there may be such a point where that whole show might take two shows, just like this one. I thought it might, but even though I'm going long, I was able to contain it. But truthfully, if 2002 goes longer than this, I would certainly probably have to put an end to it and do a little bit more in another episode. But for sure, this is longer than I expected, but it's not as long as I expected, if it makes any sense. It could have been longer than this. But just know the next 2 episodes to 3 episodes, who knows, maybe even 4, will be about 2002 of my life and 2003 of my life. Because there's so much that goes on in those years that, let's just say, wink, wink, you might even think I might write a book about it. But I digress. As I tell you that you can always find me on Instagram at Phil Henderson 5102, the Lit Facebook group. Join us. There's always room for one more. Um, Here on YouTube, my channel at Phil the Lip. Subscribe, 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 and enjoy this and all the other content that I've got going on. I'm out there on Twitter. I'm out there on X, excuse me. I'm out there on TikTok somewhere. Just check me out. But as of right now, it's time for the words of wisdom. And what do I got here? I may consider using this particular words of wisdom for the next couple of episodes because, boy, this makes it so much more relevant. In fact, yeah, this is for next week. I'm going to use this one for this week. And it's just general knowledge words that people need to know. You never have to fix a window if you don't throw a stone through it. You never have to fix a window if you don't throw a stone through it. That's all I got for you right now. Just remember, the next couple weeks, I'm going to be telling you some deep stories. My name is Phil, and you have just listened to The Lip.